What's going on, everybody? I'm Angelo Gingerelli, strength and conditioning coach at Seton Hall University, New Jersey State Director of the National Strength and Conditioning Association, and author of the next 4 years, Compete, Win, and Thrive in College Athletics. We're going to continue with this video series and talk about the great debates. Now, a couple things before we start having these debates, and I want as many comments as possible. If you disagree with me, please let me know. I love the conversation. But a couple notes before we get started. These debates and these questions are answered for incoming college freshmen. Okay, so we're talking about pretty elite athletes, about 17 or 18 years old, and kids that are going to prepare to play for college athletics. So again, these are my answers in this video, and my answers in the book for that population. If we were talking about elite athletes in their late 20s, probably some different answers. We're talking about general population, people in their 40s, again, different answers. But for that senior in high school that's going to play in college athletics, these are my answers to these great debates. Let's go. Okay, number one, strength or conditioning. In an ideal world, we have time, effort, energy, and resources to do both, every day or every week or whatever it might be. In the real world, that might not be the case. And I think if you're an incoming student athlete at the college level, you are better off focusing on conditioning other than strength. Okay, and here's my thought process on that. So that's me in the weight room at Seton Hall about to do power clean. That's me finishing the New Jersey Marathon with my wife and daughter. So shout out to them for that. But in my opinion is this: when you get to a college as a freshman and you're in the weight room and you don't know all the lifts, you need a spot, and maybe not as strong as the upperclassmen, that's why the strength staff is there. They're there to help you get proficient in the weight room, right? If you show up to campus and you can't finish the conditioning test, and you're always the last person to finish a sprint, and you're always injured because you're not physically prepared for the amount of running being done on your college campus, you immediately put a bullseye on your back as a liability to your team in that program, and the coaches are going to absolutely take note of that. So I think if you have to choose between strength and conditioning, let's choose conditioning, and once we get quote unquote in shape enough to participate, then work on being as big and strong as possible after that. The other thing I would say as a strength coach, if a kid comes to me and says, I didn't have money to train in a gym this summer, you can, number one, argue that because there's a ton of cheap options out there, but you can almost understand it. When people come to campus incredibly, quote unquote, out of shape, I don't know how that happens, because you need literally nothing. You need a pair of running shoes and a little bit of space, and you could run, agility drill, whatever it is, yourself into decent shape to be ready for your first day on campus. Next one, we're going to pick strength versus power. What are we going to pick? And my opinion for most kids is going to be strength over power, and here's why. The majority of what happens in a college weight room is the stumbling block for most people is they're not physically strong enough to do the movements properly. So I think if you just focus on the bare minimum basics, okay? Your push-ups, your pull-ups, if you have access to equipment, your squat, bench, and deadlift, you're going to show up to campus ready to go, ready to proficient on weight room a little bit better than you spent a lot of time learning your Olympic lifts, your box jump, your single leg down, stuff like that might not be happening at the college level. Next one we're going to talk about general preparation versus sports specificity, okay? And my opinion on this debate is I want to go super hard with general preparation. And I think there's absolutely a place for sports specificity. I think the further up the food chain we go, the more elite athlete we're talking about, the more important sports specificity is. But if we're talking about the overwhelming majority of high school kids coming to college, we're talking people that are novices in the weight room and incredibly young in their development as an athlete, right? If they've been playing for, let's say, 8 years by the time you meet them as a freshman in college, they're still relatively young developmentally, right? So I think we got to get great at the foundation, right? Great at your push-ups, pull-ups, squats, lunges, stuff like that. And then once that's mastered, then get into your more sport-specific movements like a block jump in volleyball or whatever it might be from there. Next one we're going to talk about is Olympic weightlifting versus powerlifting. So we're going to look at Olympic weightlifting as the clean and jerk and the snatch and the variations of those movements. And we're going to look at powerlifting as the squat, bench, and deadlift and the variations on those movements. Shout out to these guys real quick. That's my buddy Pat Mantori from Mach 1 Barbell. They were nice enough to let me do the photo shoot for the next 4 years. You can see those pictures by the book. And then in the bench press powerlifting pick, that's one of my best friends, world record holder bench press, Mike Kapinski from Toms River, New Jersey. So in my opinion, I think Olympic lifting absolutely has a place. I think if we're talking about those couple months before we report to a college campus, we want to get really good at the power lifts. We want to get really good at the squat, the bench, and the deadlift. for these two reasons. Number one, they're pretty much the foundation of everything else you're going to do in a weight room when you get to campus. Number two, you would be hard pressed to find a college strength and conditioning program that doesn't do some kind of squat, some kind of bench, and some kind of deadlift, right? If you spend a lot of time getting proficient at your clean and jerk and you're snatching those variations, there's a value to it, but they're not being done at nearly as many colleges, at least from what I've seen, as the squat, bench, and deadlift. You want to prepare for what's going to happen when you get to the next level. Getting great at your power lifts is probably a better use of your time, effort, and energy than getting great at your Olympic lifts. On top of that, a little bit of a hot take here, but I think in the era of the transfer portal, Olympic lifting might be kind of working its way out of college athletics. And the reason is this: if men and women are transferring this often and they're staying on campus, it used to be a 4-year ordeal. Now it's a 1 year. If you look at that quote unquote 1 year, it might just be from like September until March or April, and then they bounce to the next school. Is there any value in teaching movements that take weeks and months to get really good at, when you're only dealing with a kid for an in-season and not an extended amount of time and off-season, summer and stuff like that? Time will tell, but I do see in the transfer portal era, the time, effort, and labor intensiveness of the coaching the Olympic lifts might be on the way out, where the more simple stuff like your squat, bench, and deadlift are definitely going to stay in vogue and in fashion for the foreseeable future. Next question we got. Debate: are we going to get strong, or are we going to try to be functionally strong, right? Are we going to get good at our deadlifts or our single leg goblet squats? In my opinion, and again, I'm open to any interpretation on this argument you guys want to make, I think we got to get strong. We got to get strong first. So many of the men and women we're seeing at this level are coming in very skilled, great at their sport, proficient at what they're being paid to do as a student athlete, a scholarship, whatever it might be, but they're really weak, right? And we have so many private sector strength and conditioning coaches that want to sell the idea of functional strength. I think it's great. I think being quote unquote functionally strong makes sense, but I think we got to get you strong first and then find how we want to specialize and find a way to turn that, once you get a decent deadlift into a decent squat, into a decent one-leg squat with a kettlebell on Eric's mat, whatever it might be from there. Next question I got, and again, I say this in the book, I'm very clear about it. I am not a nutritionist. I've received almost no training in dietetics or nutrition at all. What I do have is decades of experience training myself and decades of experience conversing with student athletes on what they're eating, what they're drinking, and how things are working on their end. So again, this is experience talking, not formal education. Just want to make that clear. But as coaches and athletes, we have made the decision in food and supplements. I think it's pretty clear. Food is the answer. We want most of our calories and most of our nutritional intake to come from whole foods and not supplements. What I will say is this: at the college level, in certain cases, the amount of activity demanded is so high, supplements might be a good option for certain athletes during certain times of the year. Okay, so things like maybe a weight gainer, maybe a protein, a whey protein, something like that. Again, I'm not going to recommend any brands or any particular supplements, but keep in mind, these are young people that are still developing, doing an incredible amount of work. So I think once you address nutrition and hydration with whole foods and water, then maybe look to some other options if that's really not working and they're able to get over that plateau or that mountaintop to the next thing they want to achieve. Next thing I got, big argument on social media the last probably couple decades at this point: low carb versus high carb. I just want to make a quick note on this. For most college athletes that have a good body weight, reasonable amount of body fat and body composition, high carb is the way to go. For the same thing we said in the last slide. They're performing so much activity at such a high level, they need almost as many calories as they can get. Now, you want to make the right decisions with your carbs, right? But in general, high carb diet is a better choice for most college athletes. The one example of that is men and women you have that have a hard time controlling their body weight and controlling their body composition, and their body fat is staying really high despite insane amounts of physical activity. In those cases, low carb might be something to experiment with those particular men and women. But in most cases, I think we'd all agree, the amount of activity being done every day necessitates a high carb diet for just about everybody. Next, injury prevention versus reality, right? There's no shortage of people online that want to talk about how their program or their style of training will prevent injuries, okay? I think we can all agree traumatic injuries don't really get prevented this way. When we talk about overuse stuff, there might be some carryover. I think one thing we got to look at, just at big picture wise, look at what muscles and areas are often injured in any given sport and make those areas as strong as possible, right? So if we're an overhead athlete, like a baseball player that's going to throw overhead thousands of times a week possibly, or a swimmer that's going to swim 10,000 yards a day, what can we do to that shoulder joint to make it as structurally sound and injury resistant as possible? If the basketball or volleyball player, we address the knee and ankle, but just be smart about it and figure out where the injury patterns are in your sport and train to make that part of the body as strong and injury resistant as humanly possible. And the last thing I got, weight room all-star versus your gamers. Okay, this is an interesting conversation to me. Every year I'm fortunate enough to host our end of the year banquet at Seton Hall University. As you guys have seen that picture, I have a great time doing it. And usually about midway through the night, I get to give out our Iron Pirate Award, which is our weight room kind of overachiever award. It goes to one man and one woman that just went over the top with their dedication, how hard they work, stuff like that. And then at the end of the year, we give our Athlete of the Year awards, right? Well, I've been doing this for 20 years, and we've never given those two awards to the same man or woman, right? So what that means is there's a disconnect between the weight room kids and the gamers that show up on game day. As a prospective student athlete, I think what you want to look at is, how do I do both? How do I bring my A game to every single game, every single practice, impress my coaches and go beat other people in the league, but also be totally committed to the weight room and improving myself and my body to the best of my possible ability?